Are staff shakeups coming for the New York Giants after the season? A look at who's on the hot seat and why. Coming your way next on the Locked On Giants podcast.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily New York Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This episode of the Locked On Giants podcast is brought to you by Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use the promo code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. That's prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL for a first deposit up to $100. Hello, New York Giant fans, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast family, your team every day. My name's Patricia Traina, P-Train, and thank you so much for hopping on with us here on Locked On Giants. Special shout out to my everydayers, my Blue Crew community, my newcomers, and everybody in between. You are so greatly appreciated. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure you like, subscribe, and ring that little bell to this podcast channel. It would certainly be appreciated. And on today's Locked On Giants podcast, the New York Giants still have 7 games left to play as I record this, but I thought I would explore staff changes. Now, to be clear, I'm not talking about Brian Daboll, the head coach, or Joe Schoen, the general manager. I believe those two are safe, but I'm specifically going to look at the assistant coaching staff. I'm going to look at the coordinators. Then I'm going to look at some of the assistants who I think have underperformed. And a listener sent in a question to me, which I thought was pretty good, that I'm going to discuss in the final segment of the show. It's pretty much what the Giants should do in the draft, and not necessarily which quarterback should they take, but what should they do. So we'll talk about that in the third segment of this program. So again, happy to have you with us. Let's get started. All right. So Tony Pauline, who is a well-known NFL insider, had an article out recently, and he said that he reported that it is possible that all 3 Giant coordinators might not be back. So I thought I'd start with the coordinators, Wink Martindale, Mike Kafka, and Thomas McGahee. And, I went and I looked up, the performances, where they're at this point, and just taking into consideration everything. So let's start off with Kafka. All right. So perhaps no one unit on the Giants has been as hard hit as the offense in terms of injuries. Both quarterbacks, top 2 quarterbacks are gone. Andrew Thomas missed a big chunk of change. Saquon Barkley missed, a big part of the season. John Michael Schmitz missed some time. Evan Neal has been sidelined. Darren Waller's sidelined. So they've just had some really bad injury luck. But that being said, injuries are not an excuse, because the good teams figure out a way to adapt to what they have and overcome injuries. So if it means changing up the offense a little bit, changing up some of the philosophies, doing what they can to put players in the best position to be successful. And if there's an overall criticism I have of this coaching staff, is that I question just how good of a job they did with putting this entire roster in the best possible position. And we'll continue to explore that as I get into the assistant coaches and whatnot. But let me give you some stats here on the Giants offense after 10 weeks of play. They're averaging 259.2 yards per game, which is 32nd, 145.6 passing yards per game, 32nd. They have an interception rate of 2.99%, which is 26th. They are averaging 16.1 first downs per game, which is 31st. They have a third down conversion rate of 30.46, which is 31st. They have a red zone conversion rate of 38.46%, which is 30th. And they are scoring 11.8 points per game, 32nd. Yikes. That is not good, folks. And, just again, we acknowledge part of it is injuries, but, there have been guys that have been in and out of the lineup, and a good coaching staff can figure out ways to overcome it. I go back to last year, how the Giants had less to work with and how they weren't quite as bad. They were a little bit more efficient. Now, obviously the skeptics will point back to the injuries, but I still say you have to figure out a way to overcome them. That whatever hand you are dealt, you figure out a way. What do they do best and how can we make them, successful? That's why when coaches say next man up, I just cringe because, all right, yes, theoretically, the next guy on the depth chart is stepping in to a starting role or a big role, but to expect, for example, a Tommy DeVito to have the same skill set as a Tyrod Taylor or a Daniel Jones, no, these guys aren't robots. So don't tell me that, nothing needs to change because, we're on our third string quarterback. No, that's not how it works. It's never been how it works. We're all humans. We're not robots. If we were all robots that were manufactured the same way, then you could get away with it. But every human has their own strengths and weaknesses. And I just don't feel like on offense in particular that they have done what they needed to get the most out of these guys. Now, case in point, they're going to probably lean heavily on Saquon Barkley the rest of the way. Not necessarily a bad strategy, but, if we know that that's going to be the case, the opponents are going to know that. So Saquon's probably going to see a lot of stack boxes. And at the end of the year, when we do the wrap-up shows, I'm curious to see what percentage of Saquon's touches were against 8 or more men in the box. I suspect it's going to be a lot. All right. Let me jump now to Wink Martindale. Now, Martindale, I think if you had asked me a while ago if he was safe, I would have said yes. Now I'm not so sure. All right, some stats for you. They are allowing the Giants defense, that is, are ranked 27th overall, allowing 368.5 yards per game. They are 24th against the run, 131.2 yards per game, 21st against the pass, 237.3 yards per game. They only have they're ranked 31st in sacks per pass attempt at a rate of 4.60, 24th in the red zone, 62.16% allowed. They are 22nd in goal-to-goal situations, 76.19% allowed, 32nd in average point differential per game, which is minus 14.8, and they are 32nd in average yards per game, minus 109.3, and they have allowed the fourth most average points per game, 26.6. Now, those numbers are not something to hang your hat on. And as I mentioned before, the defense not really as banged up as the offense has been. Now, the excuse maker will say, well, they've got a young defensive secondary. Well, Adoree Jackson missed some time. Well, they traded away Leonard Williams. But again, I said it before, and I'm going to say it again here. Good coaching figures out how to cover up this. And, I mentioned with Wink, he lives and dies by being aggressive, which I understand that's his MO. I checked in Sports Info Solutions, and he has used a 4-man rush, for example, on the pass rush on 48% of the times. And I gave you that stat on the sacks, converting sacks on 4.6%. He's used zone defense or zone coverage 43% of the time, which is 32nd in the NFL. When you have a young secondary, such as what the Giants have, why are you not using more zone to get these guys comfortable? So this goes back to what I keep saying. Put the guys in the best position to be successful, even if it means shelving what you believe in or cutting back on what you believe in. And I don't think that Wink Martindale has necessarily done a good job of that. The other point that I want to make about Wink before I get to Thomas McGahee, Wink and head coach Brian Daboll have two very different communication styles. Wink is very open, whereas Daboll tends to be a lot more reserved. So, for example, when the Xavier McKinney incident went down with the comments that McKinney made, Daboll tried to brush it off, whereas Wink basically spilled the tea a little bit as to what was said, the conversation, what he told the defense and so forth. You got to wonder if Dable wasn't happy with that, was if he was upset that that got out and wasn't kept in house. The sideline dramas that we saw, which Martindale has since clarified as, they were discussing personnel and who would be available to them and whatnot. Just the fact that Wink Martindale is willing to step up there and clear his name, whereas Dable tends to be more, secretive or discreet, if you will. You got to wonder if perhaps Dable is maybe thinking, okay, you know what? This guy might be a bit of a loose cannon because he's always ready to jump in to defend himself. So I just wonder if the communication styles are going to ultimately come back to haunt Wink Martindale. That and more so the defense's performance, which just hasn't been good at all. I mean, and again, other than really Adoree Jackson, I'm trying to think in terms of injuries. They, Azeez Ojulari, who's kind of been, a forgotten factor at this point, given all the time he's missed. But the Giants, the defense should have been a lot better. And for a while they were playing better, but now the wheels have fallen off the wagon, and hard to say why. So, all right, coming up next, we'll talk about Thomas McGahee's position. And I'm also going to give you a couple of assistant coaches, position coaches that are most likely on the bubble. That's coming up right after this. Hey, Giant fans, if you're looking for a fun and different way to play fantasy football this season, you need to check out Prize Picks. Just pick 2 or more players, predict their stats, and sit back and see how they perform. It takes less than 60 seconds to make an entry, and best of all, you can turn a few bucks into some nice cash with just the right projections. Prize Picks is the #1 daily fantasy sports app, known for its quick withdrawals, easy gameplay, and wide selection of player stats and types. And they offer weekly promotions that can lead to big payouts like Taco Tuesday, when each Tuesday Prize Picks discounts select player projections up to 25% to provide even more value. So what are you waiting for? Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use the promo code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. That's prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL, and that promo code is LockedOnNFL for your first deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks, daily fantasy sports made easy. Hey, Giant fans, Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. All right, everybody, welcome back to Locked On Giants. I'm Patricia Traynor, your host. And don't forget, tonight, Locked On Giants Live, Friday night, 7:30, Trainer, Tana, and Dog. We're going to go from 7:30 to about 9:30, have a live stream. So we're going to be talking all things Giants. And, of course, we welcome in our community members who come in and participate. We'll answer your questions as we get later on into the show. So hopefully you'll be able to join us. And for those of you who missed the program, it will be available for replay on YouTube. And also I will post the audio for those of you who like to listen to our program on the audio platforms. So don't forget to mark that. All right, let's get back to the look at assistant coaches and coordinators who may be on the hot seat after this season is over. I mentioned Wink Martindale and Mike Kafka. Got to throw T-Mac in there, Thomas McGahee. Now, McGahee, look, he's been with the Giants for a number of years, and I don't think he's a horrible special teams coach. But that said, he just hasn't been the same. Just something's been missing from what he's delivered since Joe Judge was here. And I don't know if it's because Joe Judge being a special teams coordinator prior to becoming the Giants head coach, if he just influenced McGahee with different ways of doing things. I don't know what the reason is, but I do know the Giants special teams have not been scary or, really top notch in a number of years. You look at mistakes that are made, assignments that they screw up. You look at the fact that they can't flip the field to their advantage. I'll give you some numbers. Currently, the punt return is averaging 6.7 yards per return. That's 28th. Kickoff return is 20.8 yards, which is 23rd. I mean, if you're doing anything less than 25 on kickoff return, then that's not good. The coverage unit, 6.3 yards allowed. That's 7th in the league, which is not too bad. The gunner play, by the way, of Darnay Holmes and Nick McLeod has been spectacular, and actually an underrated story this year. And then kickoff coverage, they're averaging 24.2 yards, which is 23rd in the league. Okay, not too bad, but you'd like it to be a little higher. But, I go back and I say, when was the last time the Giants special teams really put the fear of God in anybody? I don't think they have. They don't flip the field as often as they should. They don't give the offense a competitive advantage or the defense a competitive advantage on a consistent basis. There are mistakes made with lane integrity on coverage, with penalties, with sloppiness, like blocks in the back and whatnot. It's just sloppy. And then there's been even a couple times this year where, at least one time that I know of, where they didn't have the right number of guys on the field. And you sit there and you just shake your head and you're like, what the heck is going on? The other thing I've often said too is the Giants don't have a kicking coach. That's not really something that I think Thomas McGahee specializes in. And I mentioned that because not that Graham Gano needs a kicking coach, but for all the times Jamie Gillen was inconsistent, maybe he could have benefited from one. They signed this kid, Cade York, to the roster, who's a young kicker who has struggled thus far in the NFL. You don't think he could have benefited from a kicking coach? I know kicking coaches are not really, popular amongst coaching staffs, but could it hurt if you're serious about developing your kickers and your punters? I don't see that it could, or I just, I think it would be a benefit, to be honest with you. But such is the way the Giants have decided to go about it. And I just think, I listen to what McGahee has to say week in and week out. And I don't want to speculate too heavily, but he just, to me, sounds like he's almost defeated. And, I don't know if something's going on. I hope the man is feeling okay. I know he had a bout with some health issues, but I just think it's probably time for him to, move on, and maybe the Giants to get another special teams coordinator. So in sum, folks, I could see a scenario where all three coordinators are replaced. I think that would be a drastic move. And if you were to ask me, who's safest and rank them from safe to least safe, Martindale, McGahee, and probably Kafka. Those two bottom ones, I think, actually are tied. So we could see some major changes coming at the coordinator spot. Now, there's also probably going to be some staff shakeups at the assistant level. One guy I'm going to give you, I know you know who I'm talking about, Bobby Johnson, the offensive line coach. Now, I did a show, my everydayers will remember I did a show earlier this week called the O-line, as an OH line. And I spoke about how this team has completely bungled getting that unit ready. They wanted to be positionless, have a guy play multiple positions in training camp in case there were injuries. And y'all know the expression, jack of all trades, master of none. That was a problem. And when you're talking about, younger depth, and you're throwing at them different positions and having them play different sides, that could take some getting used to. And I just felt like the way they were mixing and matching guys, not very good, right? Some stats for you from the online. They've allowed 17.94% sacks per pass attempt, which is 32nd in the league, 54 sacks, which is first in the NFL, and 292 yards lost on sacks, which is second most in the NFL. All right. So basically, it's not just one offensive lineman or two offensive linemen that are having problems. It's the entire unit. All right. You can even, can you excuse Andrew Thomas from that list? Well, Andrew's been hurt. So, you know, you can maybe make that excuse for him. But the rest of the line, Evan Neal hasn't stepped up. John Michael Schmitz has played well, but he's had a few hiccups along the way. The guards are still kind of a mess. So I just feel like the entire offensive line operation, and I'll add to that the fact that they didn't know what five guys they wanted to roll with going into the season until like the very end. That's like, I don't know, that's like putting multiple fabric swatches in front of, somebody and saying, okay, pick one. And you sit there and you literally wait until 5 minutes before you have to pick before your deadline. And it's like, you can't do that. You got to, when it comes to the offensive line, the sooner you solidify that group, the better. So that was a big problem. And I suspect Bobby Johnson, even though Brian Dable brought him down with him from Buffalo, I got to think maybe they look to move on, especially if the priority is going to be fixing that offensive line for whoever happens to play quarterback next year. I'll give you one other assistant coach that I wonder if he's safe or if he might be replaced, and that is wide receivers coach Mike Groh. Now, I don't know about you, but I still am not sure exactly why Jalen Hyatt is not seeing more targets. I think he's only seen about 20 targets. Why hasn't he seen a larger role? The kid is coachable. The kid is willing to learn. But yet it just seems like his transition to the pros has been going at a snail's pace. And I wonder why. Is it what he's being taught? Is it his performance in practice? I come back to the coaching staff on that. You would hope that somebody from that receiver group would step up and be the go-to guy. Can we honestly say they have a go-to guy? I mean, Isaiah Hodgins has regressed. I mean, when was the last time he made a play that we were like, oh wow, Darius Slayton has been okay, not great, but okay. He cleaned up the dropsies that he had, which is good. Sterling Shepard, they phased him out, even though I suspect, to me, Sterling Shepard's probably still one of their better receivers in terms of reliability and getting open. He might not have the speed, but he's still, I think a functional receiver. Not figuring out, the role for Paris Campbell. And, now that although they're starting to get him more involved, I just don't know what they're doing with these receivers. And it's a very bland looking group. Like I said, Hodgins disappeared. So we're not really talking about, the receivers and just how exposed they've been, I guess, since Darren Waller went down. And not that Darren Waller was, ripping up the scene as it was, he just because of the passing game and the offensive line problems. But the receiver group, for me, the Giants receiver group, disappointing. And, I think you got to look at Mike Groh on that and just say, okay, is he the guy moving forward? And I do have one other guy I want to mention before I go to the next segment here. Not so much because I think he might be on the bubble, but if Wink Martindale goes, I could potentially see this guy leaving as well. And that's outside linebackers coach Drew Wilkins. I think Wilkins and Martindale are pretty much attached at the hip. So unless the Giants were to promote Wilkins to defensive coordinator, if Wink Martindale is not retained or leaves, I could see him going as well. Wilkins, you could look at the job he's done with Kayvon Thibodeau, with getting him to take a step forward in year 2. The pass rush, not great for the Giants, but, you wonder what it would be like if they had actually added another pass rusher, like I'd scream for them to do. Ojulari, when he's out there, he shows flashes, but the kid can't stay on the field. So that's a problem. So those are 3 assistant coaches from at the position rank that I think might be in jeopardy. Could there be more? I possibly, but I just don't know that Brian Dable's going to do a massive overhaul of his staff. Although I suppose if he changes out all three coordinators, and again, I think the odds of that happening are low. I think for sure one, possibly two will go, but all three, that one I'd like to see if that happens. I don't know that it will. All right, coming up next, we got a listener question that I want to talk about. I promised this listener that I would discuss this, so don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Hey, Giant fans. So it never fails. You're watching a game and then you suddenly get a rumble in your stomach. But with so few precious minutes in between plays and quarters, often there's barely enough time to run to the fridge and heat something up to munch on. Well, now you don't have to, thanks to DoorDash. Whether you're craving pizza, wings, tacos, burgers, you name it, and DoorDash can bring it straight to your door so that you don't have to miss a second of your favorite programming. For years, I've trusted DoorDash to deliver freshly made meals from my favorite restaurants, whether I'm at home or I'm on the road, and they've never let me down. DoorDash has allowed me to support my favorite small business stores like the Food Architects. And DoorDash doesn't just deliver meals. They get groceries and snacks and incidentals delivered from local drugstores and convenience stores as well. You get what you ordered or they will make it right. And you can save on all your deliveries with a monthly Dash Pass membership. That's more than pays for itself after just a couple of deliveries. There's never been a better time than now to join DoorDash. As for a limited time, you can get up to 50% off your first DoorDash order, up to $10 when you spend $15 or more on that order. Download the DoorDash app and enter the promo code LOCKED23 at checkout. Again, that promo code is LOCKED23 at checkout on the DoorDash app. Offer subject to change. Terms apply. All right, everybody, welcome back to Locked On Giants Friday edition. I'm your host, Patricia Traina. And coming up, as I mentioned, those of you who are watching this program when it drops or even during the day, tonight at 7:30, Friday night, 7:30, Locked On Giants Live, Traina, Tana, and Dog. Then next week, which is the last week before leading into the bye week, we'll, of course, have the Monday review of the Giants Commanders game. And then we'll just continue rolling on with some programming. Let's talk about a question that I got from one of my everydayers. This is from Pete M. And he said, Pat, I was thinking, all this talk about the Giants drafting a quarterback if they're, drafted high. But what if they decided, you know what? We'll sign a veteran or Daniel Jones might be ready. And instead of going with a quarterback, what about an offensive tackle and move Evan Neal inside to right guard? Okay. Fair question. Because everybody right now is assuming the Giants are going to draft a quarterback. And I think, for the record, that if the Giants are drafting like in the top 3-4 slots, I think it's possible. I think it's very possible that they draft a quarterback. Would they, a lot of people are like, well, Pat, they've got to fix the offensive line, which is something I've argued in the past. But let's talk about that for a second here. Andrew Thomas and John Michael Schmitz are set. I think we could all agree. Do they kick Evan Neal inside to right guard? Because I don't know that they're going to retain Mark Lewinsky after this year. I think he's going to be a cap cut. I could see them experimenting with that. Absolutely. Left guard, I'm not sure what they're going to do there. Does Justin Pugh come back or do they move on from him? Do they give Joshua Azudu another crack over there? Or do they have somebody, as Marcus McKethan, maybe a guy that they start training over there? I don't know. But as guards they can pick up easily, I think. And then if you move Neal from right tackle to right guard, what do you plug in at right tackle? Well, maybe you go out and you get a veteran. You're going to have like a bunch of free agent, you're going to have a bunch of cap space that you can spend on. All right. Because you basically have tied up as far as your must-haves. You've done all your contract work this year. So really all that remains for Joe Shane to decide on is Saquon Barkley and Xavier McKinney. Those are the only two really big contracts, potentially big contracts that they have to make a decision on. And I think of the two, I don't think McKinney's coming back. I think, Saquon has a better chance of coming back than McKinney. So you're not talking a huge amount of money, because remember, in the first year of every, multi-year contract, usually the cap number is low. So what's to stop the Giants from maybe going out in free agency and finding the next Kareem McKenzie to play right tackle? For those of you who don't remember, Kareem McKenzie came to the Giants as a free agent. He had played the first 4 years of his career with the Jets, and he was one of the best right tackles this team has had in a while. The Giants, of course, winning 2 Super Bowls with him at right tackle. I mean, man was just shut down quality. So if you can find a guy like that to pair opposite of Andrew Thomas, your tackles are set. And then it's just a question of now getting depth in here and developing the depth. And I go back to again, getting the right coaching in here, because that has been, to my thinking at any rate, that has been a problem. So, but let me get back to the question here. Taking an offensive tackle at 2 or 3, in the top 5 picks, if that's where you're drafting, I'm going to say probably not. But I say that with a little bit of hesitancy, because we still need to see who declares from amongst the underclassmen. I keep telling people who keep asking for mock drafts and stuff, give me a full, draft class to pick from before I sit down and do a mock. I'm just not ready to go there yet. We don't know. We don't know if maybe these top prospects that we're eyeballing at certain positions are going to end up hurt. There's a lot that can happen between now and the time these guys got to declare. So I'm reluctant to get too far into the draft, but I certainly understand the idea that, okay, get the offensive line up to snuff, especially if you want to have a new quarterback. And for the record, folks, I know that Daniel Jones is going to be back next year because of his cap hit. Will he be ready to start? There's an outside chance. I mean, that's why on Wednesday I asked Brian Dable if surgery had been scheduled yet for Jones, because when he has that surgery is going to likely depend on how long his recovery time is. I don't think everybody's like an Adrian Peterson where they can come back in 6 months or so. So that's going to be important to monitor, the timing. So in the meantime, do you say to yourself, okay, if he's healthy, we're going to stick with Jones because he's been dealt another bad hand this year? Or do you just say, look, he can't keep making excuses for this guy after a while. He's had, 5 years, 6 years? It's time to move on. So that also kind of ties in a little bit to maybe what they do in offensive coordinator. I know it's Brian Dable's offense. The philosophies are very heavily influenced by him. But maybe if they do move on from Mike Kafka, maybe they get an offensive coordinator with a little different perspective that maybe integrates a little bit of, what Pat Shurmur used to do with Daniel Jones, which made Daniel Jones look so promising. So there's so many puzzle pieces and they all intertwine together. It's going to be interesting to see how the Giants put them all together. But yes, the offensive line does need to be fixed. It needs to be addressed again. And it's not just the talent. It's not just the depth. It's the coaching. So yeah, changes are coming, folks. Big changes. I would be stunned if it was otherwise. And of course, we at the Locked On Giants podcast will bring you all the changes and the analysis and whatnot to come from them. So on that note, I'm going to call it a show. Thank you, as always, for tuning in, making us your first listen of the day, or if you watch on YouTube, your first watch of the day. Those of you who are going to join us tonight for Locked On Giants Live, we, of course, will see you on the YouTube channel. And those of you who can't make it, I wish you a very happy weekend. Hope the football game is at least competitive. Fingers crossed. And I will see you guys and gals on Monday.